Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, the Emmy Award winning Bill Harvey. Are you looking for a book that would challenge your thoughts regarding higher consciousness? Or perhaps you're looking for a fictional sci-fi thriller series about the covert U.S. psychic program? Then today's show is just for you. Bill Harvey's here to share his award-winning books, Mind Magic, Doorways into Higher Consciousness, followed by 2 books in his Agents of Cosmic Intelligence series, The Message and Pandemonium, live to all devices. So Bill is an Emmy Award winner and media research industry leader. He has foretold and shaped the future of media for over 35 years. Bill's first book published was Mind Magic, now in its 6th edition. He currently has 6 books published, 3 nonfiction and 3 science fiction. His writings include the sci-fi series Agents of Cosmic Intelligence, is focused on helping individuals become more effective. In works of fiction, he demonstrates the strength of his characters in action and zooms in on the inner process these characters use. Bill's worldview is open-minded, scientific, inclusive of the possibility that the universe is conscious and that each of us experiences the consciousness of the universe as our own consciousness, and that reality at its core is consciousness with matter and energy being phenomenon projected within consciousness. In his nonfiction books, he provides experiments that the readers can do, which could lead them to the discovery that their hunches are meaningful and the universe might be trying to give us clues to each of us. So let's welcome to the show, Bill Harvey.
Thanks so much, Marianne.
My goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about these books. Congratulations on all the accolades you've been receiving for this. I mean, people were really loving this work.
Well, I'm so gratified by that. I can't tell you.
Well, I have so many questions. Why don't we start with your first book, Mind Magic? Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
It's kind of my notes to myself as I was growing up, as I studied my own mind and found that I was making lots of mistakes of different kinds and detected patterns in the mistakes and gradually came to practical solutions for how to avoid getting obsessed with something or angry or fearful. So I collected all of that. When I was around 30 years old, I put it into a book and called it Mind Magic. It's not magical, of course. It's, if anything, somewhat scientific, but it reads more like poetry to some people. It's like talking to yourself or listening to your mind. It's the kind of stuff that comes up when we're unguarded and talking to ourselves and being mindful.
Well, you're definitely ahead of your time because I know it first was published in 1976. And while that was a time of great expansion for consciousness, in many ways, it also wasn't very mainstream. Not a lot of people were talking about that as they are today. Is that kind of some of your thoughts?
Gosh, absolutely. The only book that was current at the time that I certainly read and many others read was Ram Dass's book, Be Here Now. That came out before my book did, and certainly had some influence on me, very positive influence, and as did all of his writings. There had been, of course, going back in time, Alan Watts, Krishnamurti, there had been books along the way, going back to Epictetus and the Enchiridion. I think that was around 300 AD, but the tremendous number of books that are out on the market now about mindfulness, meditation, yoga, it's certainly needed. And it's not just my work. I'm just now part of an ocean of work that is helping to wake people up to what scientists call metacognition, being able to get above your own thinking and study it as if from the outside, and therefore be more rational and balanced.
Well, I've often heard it said that if the ocean is consciousness, there are many rivers that lead to it. So
Mm.
people find that river that flows with them. That makes sense. And your book definitely has done that for so many people over the years.
Now, it's the thing that makes me happiest is to know that people are reading it and getting some benefit out of it. It's very difficult, particularly for adults. We've become so set in our ways, and each of us has developed our own coping system, some of which are maybe almost as good as mine or better. So it's a complicated subject, but it's hard to change habits, particularly when you've been doing them thousands and 10,000 times. That repetition gets kind of built into our nervous system. And so when we try to overcome depression or anxiety or whatever it might be, it ain't easy. And so every little bit helps. And I'm glad that some of the ways that worked for me are working for other people.
And I think when we get down to really the basics, when we talk about these habits and these belief systems that people carry, a lot of times they're not even ours. They could be from our grandparents, great grandparents, and so on. So we're like carrying everyone else's luggage with us as we go along.
Well said. Yeah, it's being externally influenced. It's reducing our own free will, our own independent thinking. And we don't know we're doing that. We don't know we've been conditioned, like Pavlov's dog. We don't know that when we were very, very young and dependent on our parents and feeling our way and knowing that we don't know anything, we're very, very influenceable. And so those early patterns are laid down, and after a while it's like water to the fishes. We don't notice it. We don't notice that we have a bias in one direction or another. It's hard, even when it's pointed out to us, for us to gradually realize it.
We've been talking about mind magic, and congratulations. I mean, you're Emmy Award winner. So if we put things in perspective, awards are awards are awards, but my goodness, you've just received a silver award for this book. And how great is that? So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Well, so let's talk about your next book in the series, The Message. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it started out from two directions. One was I wanted to use fiction as kind of an experiment. Here I'd written a book, Mind Magic, which is nonfiction. And I was able to just share my thoughts and achieve some degree of benefit for people. But then I wondered, what if I tried to pass the same information through works of fiction? Would that add anything? Would it make it closer to life? Would it make it, you can go in a novel, you can go into people's heads. You can narrate what they're thinking. You can then show what their actions are. It's much more like life. I also was excited by the notion of going back to fiction, which is where I'd started as a kid, sci-fi. But the other direction it was coming from was consciousness itself, which is occupied so much of my attention over my entire life, paying attention to my own consciousness, staying up late at night in bed, pretending to be sleeping while actually thinking and trying to figure things out. Consciousness isn't yet part of science. I mean, it should be, because there's a whole science of psychology. But psychology has, first it went through a period in about 100 years ago, B.F. Skinner, of behaviorism, where the thoughts in our mind were dismissed as epiphenomena that didn't really affect our actions. We just thought the thinking was affecting our actions, but actually it was just noise, and our bodies were operating the way they would operate mechanically. That wasn't a good theory, but that's just my opinion. But nowadays, now that we've had Maslow and we've had Richard Alpert and Ram Dass, his two personas, and a lot of other great psychology we're more at a balance point where some of it is about introspection. Most of it isn't. Most of it's still about taking measurements, experiments, which I have no quarrel with. But physics, which has had such an impact on our culture, the development of not only the atom bomb, but television and internet and GPS, all of it depends on quantum mechanics and relativity, the two great movements forward in physics. But those movements, other than at the fringes, have left out consciousness. I wanted to bring consciousness into the picture, and I thought I could also do that by means of fiction. So the message is about ostensibly the first thing we learn is that the U.S. has a secret unit called Theta Force, which is essentially the Army's psychic spy unit. And it came about in relation to discovering that the Soviets or the Russians have the same psychotronic division already. So this is being formed as the story begins. We meet a guy named Martin Williams, who is back in Afghanistan on a mission to try to end the civil war. And this is like 20 years in the future from now. And his hunches always seem to be right. So his commanding officer initially shuts him up when he comes up and talks about his hunches, but eventually learns to pay attention to those hunches. So he winds up being recruited to run this organization, Theta Force. But he decides that he's not the guy to run it. He wants to be the number two guy. So he talks the generals into letting his commanding officer, Tim Shannon, run the unit. And they agree with Williams's request not to let Shannon know that they almost gave Williams his command. So as we enter the story there, we start to see how the psychics are being trained by Williams to pay attention to their hunches, to even know that they have hunches, to pay enough internal attention so as to be able to catch hunches when they slip into the mind kind of surreptitiously. And so the book intends to be a vehicle for training people to do metacognition and perhaps to discover that they do sometimes read other people's minds and sometimes do have hunches that come true, precognition actually, that those things actually happen under certain conditions. This all goes back to mind magic for a second. Mind magic is an attempt to get people out of the everyday state of consciousness, first into that observer state of metacognition, but ultimately into the flow state. And in the flow state, it feels like a magical, supernatural experience because things are doing themselves automatically. You're exceeding your own capabilities as far as you knew you had those capabilities. You're exceeding your own expectations. You're performing at a higher level than you knew you could perform at. So the same is true with the theta agents. Williams is training them to get into the flow state and to be able to perform at that level. So that's the introduction to the story. I don't want to go too far into the details of the actual events because I want it to be fun when people read it.
No doubt. I mean, it is something that when people do pick up and start to read, it is not what they think, which is really, it makes a very adventurous read. So tell us about the next book in the series.
The next book, as you say, is Pandemonium, Live to All Devices. And it's the sequel to The Message. The same characters are in Pandemonium. Now, the title, The Message, of that book came from the fact that there's a key event that happens fairly early in the story, and that is every psychic on Earth, not just Theta Force and not just the Russian counterpart, But every psychic, whether they're readers of tarot cards or whatever they may be, gets the same psychic message at the same exact time. And it lasts for almost an hour. And the message comes with pictures and words, and everybody hears it in their own language. And actually, everybody gets a slightly different message. But the general message is that we're all one consciousness. And it's one consciousness that's always been around and is playing every role. We think of ourselves as separate individuals, but each of us is really the original consciousness. So Williams gets the message very clearly, and it changes him. It puts him pretty much all the time into the flow state. And of course, his colleagues notice that. Now, in Pandemonium, this is now like a year later, and the story starts with there's a guy named Temple Guard who's brought into the story. He appeared in the message, but he was always off stage. He was only appearing psychically. He was alive. He was actually fighting in Afghanistan and in other places and spying and getting caught and tortured and all kinds of things going on. But he's never in the main action on the message. But at the beginning of Pandemonium, he is the main character of that book. And so we learn that he is a secret agent, not a psychic agent. In fact, he doesn't believe in psychic powers. But the president, to whom he reports, he's like a personal spy for the president. The president assigns him to spy on Theta Force. And he says, but if they're really psychic and I'm not, how can I spy on them? They'll know right away that I'm a spy and spying on them. And the president reminds him of a test he's just passed, the monkey test. And the monkey test, nobody could pass it except Temple Guard. They found this guy who was already working for them in the military, who would be the perfect spy to spy on psychics because he was able to not think of a monkey. That was the test. Don't think of a monkey. And they had a machine that could tell whether you were thinking of a monkey. And nobody else ever passed the test, but he did. And the president asks him, how did he manage to concentrate so strongly to be able to pass the test? And he admits that he was having an erotic fantasy. And they both laugh. And the president asks him how he came up with that. Seems to work. Great idea, Temple Guard. But where did you come up with that one? And Temple Guard says, well, I was being tortured, sir. And the president quickly changes the subject. So Temple Guard becomes a spy on Theta. But to Theta, he's being inducted into Theta to toughen up the outfit. So that's the way that story begins. And I don't want to reveal how it unfolds, but I want to give a little bit more of a hint on this whole series, the series of sci-fi novels, of which there are now 3 that have been published and another one coming out this year, is called Agents of Cosmic Intelligence. And the premise is that these are agents of the one consciousness. And they're on Earth to protect Earth against Perse. Perse being another powerful being that is spawned by the one consciousness as kind of a radical experiment to try to be a pressure test, so to speak, a kind of an adversary. So the adversary has started a war cosmically against the forces of the one consciousness. And the one consciousness has reacted by creating the agents as a team to essentially keep Perse from causing suffering and on Earth to reduce suffering as much as possible without interfering with the game. And the game is to allow Perse to run wild and do whatever he does, but to try to get him to come back into realization that he himself is part of the one self that he's trying to fight against. So these theta agents, 4 of them, Williams, Templeguard, Tim Shannon, the guy who became the boss of the unit, Theta, and Shauna Moon, those are actually agents of cosmic intelligence. They don't remember that. They just think they're human beings, but they're actually agents of cosmic intelligence with more powers than human beings have, but they don't remember any of that. And there's another member of their original team who's actually on the Russian side, and she doesn't remember that either, although she's got a bit more of a memory of it than the 4 Americans. I think I'll stop there so I don't give away too much of the story.
Oh, it's such a great story. And to hear that there's another coming out, how exciting is that?
I'm excited.
People are going to be on the edge of their seats for that one. So how did the idea of this series even come to you? Where did that thread start?
It was in the 70s. And, well, I have to go back actually even further than that. So as I was growing up, from about 4 or 5 years old, I started to pay a lot of attention to my own mind. And it came about because my showbiz parents had put me on stage. And it was while performing on stage that I discovered the flow state. And so I wanted to figure out what that was so I could get back and spend more time in that state. It just came every now and then, and then it went away just as fast. And I wanted to keep it. And later on, I also wanted to be able to describe it to other people. But while I was a kid, I rarely talked about it to anyone because I didn't think I could explain it, and they might think I was crazy. But I started to discern different voices in my mind. There was one voice in my mind which always spoke very calmly and quietly, and usually only when my mind was still. And it never gave me bad advice. And I started to learn to be able to detect that voice so that I could actually act on what that voice wanted me to do rather than on every single impulse. So then when I was 12 years old, I considered myself an atheist because I had been reading all this sci-fi and also science. And I thought very highly of science, and I still do. And that led me to believe that God was basically superstition. And when I was 12, an idea suddenly popped into my head out of nowhere. I could tell that it came from some series of thoughts I had had, mostly images, but I couldn't recapture the thoughts and the images that led to this idea, which came in words in my mind. And the words were, I am God and so is everyone else. And it had the feeling of truth to it because it came from that place that only gave me truth. But I couldn't explain it. But it opened my mind to maybe there's a scientific way that can be true. Maybe the word God is misleading because I associate God with organized religions and organized theologies and beliefs. But what if I just assume that the universe is intelligent and that's the one self and that maybe it's playing all roles? That took me, incidentally, 20 years to get from that flash when I was 12 years old to a complete explanation to myself of how it could actually be true. And so in the 70s, I wanted to write about that. And I was going to call it The Theory of the Conscious Universe. It was going to be nonfiction. And then, of course, I wrote it. And I didn't publish it. And then I suddenly had the feeling that I wanted to turn it into fiction. And I wanted it to write a script, a movie script. So I wrote a movie script called Triple Agent. And it is now there's 2 books in Pandemonium, and it is the first book of Pandemonium, but I actually wrote it a long time ago. So that's how I got into writing the series of books/movies. I hope that each book turns into, the books are so packed, getting them into a 100-minute standard movie, probably each book would become 3 100-minute movies, is my estimate. But getting them turned into movies at some point is my real life's dream. That would be just such fun. And I think it would have potentially so much impact on getting people to drop their resistance. In our lifetime, and I'm quite a bit older than you, but I think even in your lifetime, really only over the last 20 years, the surveys are showing that in America, the belief in a God of some kind, which had been at 90% about 20 years ago, is down to 70%. It's been going down for the last 20 years. And I think it's partially because the picture that we're all given of God is so superstition-like, picturing him as being limited to one sex, for example. I mean, the very idea of God is unlimitedness. So it couldn't be just limited to one sex, but or one anything. But if we imagine the most powerful computer we can imagine, made out of energy, and that it's a living thing with self-awareness, that would be my concept of the real God, the one self that's playing all of our roles. So I wanted to depict this, and I ultimately wrote a book called You Are the Universe, and then my new book, A Theory of Everything, that are nonfiction. But I thought that fiction could have more of an effect, that emotional, you can't change people's behavior just based on reasoning. Emotion has to be involved, or there won't be real changes in oneself.
Such wise words, really, to move forward in. And it's interesting, we've come to this place in our time in history where a lot of theories of consciousness have actually started being proved by science over the last few years. So all that's coming full circle.
It is. I just, somebody just sent me an email yesterday about a guy who's written a book. It's called The Observer, which is interesting since I write about the observer state, the mindfulness state that comes before flow state. So the book is a fiction book. He's a doctor, and he's writing about what he really believes is scientifically true, which is that biology is the core of the universe. Biology and consciousness, a living consciousness. So of course I have to read that book. It sounds so close to my own theory. Perhaps they're identical. Perhaps they're identical theories. And then there have been other interesting articles just in the last 10 years about possibly the universe being a simulation. That comes very close also to my ideas that all of this is what the ancient sages of India called Maya. There's all this world of illusion that we're living in. And underneath, we're all consciousness, and we're all, in fact, one consciousness. But from the Maya, you can't immediately detect that. Makes it quite a fun game of discovering, kind of a God playing hide and seek with himself, herself.
Oh my goodness, Bill. I mean, we could talk for hours. I know we're going to have another discussion coming up on your new book. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
The website is a nonprofit, so it ends in .org, .org rather than any other ending, and it's www.humaneffectivenessinstitute.org, and it's got my scientific theories, my books, my blog, over 100 videos it's got a lot of fun stuff on it, I think.
A lot of great information. Well, Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure. I look forward to the next time.
Well, thank you, Bill. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new books, Mind Magic, Doorways into Higher Consciousness, followed by Agents of Cosmic Intelligence series, The Message and Pandemonium, live to all devices. Again, if you'd like to connect with Bill Harvey and learn more about his work and his books, please visit humaneffectivenessinstitute.org. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Pandemonium. Fast forward 20 years. A U.S. president seizes control of all U.S. missiles, the power grid, the banking system, and every computer in America as he hides in an underground bunker. Pandemonium, a captivating sci-fi thriller where a hidden war, psychics, aliens, artificial intelligence, and transcendental love collide with the latest media technology. Pandemonium, live to all devices. Get your copy on paperback or digital. Free sample at getpsychic.org.
Are you looking to untangle life's riddles? Discover the profound teachings of Dr. Shai Tabali, renowned philosopher, best-selling author, and your guide to self-empowerment. With methods that harmonize psychological and spiritual principles, Dr. Tabali's wisdom offers a pathway to holistic transformation. Take that first step today and join thousands globally and embrace the journey to higher consciousness. Visit shaitabali.com, that's SHAITUBALI.com now.
Hello, Dr. Cutler here. Do you experience bloating, heartburn, food craving, bowel irregularity, food sensitivities, weight issues? If you do not digest your food, you may be deficient in macronutrients, which your body needs for optimal health. DrEllenCutler.com teaches that this is an enzyme deficiency. I believe the most important supplement is a full-spectrum digestive enzyme, Dr. Ellen's Way Digestive Enzymes. Hear more about it at DrEllenCutler.com.
Are you chasing profitability yet losing fulfillment? Let me introduce you to your solution, the Relaunch Company. I'm Hillary DeCesar, an entrepreneurial performance coach, fearless leader of the Relaunch Company, here to help put the pedal to the metal and relaunch your business your way. Visit www.therelaunch.com. Take the free quiz to learn 3 steps towards waving goodbye to burnout and hello to success.
The book Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis, authored by Danny Carroll, is on sale at Amazon now. Licensed psychologist and psychotherapist Tessa Antia-John-Guerra commented, "This is one of the most empowering books on the topic of cancer you will ever read." Award-winning author T.L. Needham commented, "This recommended book can be understood by anyone seeking answers, hope, and alternatives to a terminal diagnosis. Buy it now on Amazon.com.
Are you a coffee lover who wants to make a difference? Look no further than Fire Department Coffee, a veteran-owned business that gives back to support first responders in need. Each batch of coffee is freshly roasted right here in the USA by a dedicated team of first responders and coffee experts. So when you enjoy a cup of Fire Department coffee, you're not only drinking high-quality coffee, you're supporting members of your community. Start your day with a coffee that gives back. Visit firedepartmentcoffee.com. That's fire, DEPT, coffee.com.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with our next special guest, Jordan Lee Dooley, who's here to share with us her new book, Embrace Your Almost. Find clarity and contentment in the in-betweens, not-quites, and unknowns. So welcome to the show, Jordan Lee Dooley.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. I got to tell you, once I saw this, I was like, okay, we need to talk. So what inspired you to write this? Why don't you share a little bit about your story?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I found myself with a variety of different, I call them almosts. And what I mean by that I mean the situations in life where you're just shy of the finish line. I always refer back to when I was in high school, I decided to run track one year. I was terrible at track. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea, but I decided to do that. And the first race I ran, I was neck and neck for first place in like the final several yards of the race. And I had this idea to lean over the finish line to try to beat my opponent by like a millisecond. But I had no experience with that tactic at all. And as I leaned way too early and way too far. And my momentum carried me forward and I face planted on the track, like skid marks, like on my arms, like scabbed up elbows, like all the things. Everyone ran past me. I almost finished first and I ended up finishing dead last. And I share that story in the beginning of the book because I think it's such a visual of what can happen in our lives when we run so hard and so fast after something we want so bad, whether that's a promotion or a new career or a family or a relationship or whatever. And sometimes we can like force the issue so much that we find ourselves like feeling like no matter what we do, we fall just short of where we thought we would be by now in our lives. And, not only in my own experience with some lighter things and some heavier things, I not only lived through that in various ways, but I also felt like through the last several years, so many of us have had that. I almost got married and my wedding had to get pushed back a year, or I almost, made it to partner. And then my company, had layoffs because the whole world changed. Like there were so many almost, not only in my life, but globally, that I just felt like this is a message we need, because when something almost works out, but then doesn't, a lot of times we find ourselves kind of reeling a little bit, and we find ourselves in a waiting season or a feeling of unknown and uncertainty of like, well, now what? Like, what does this future look like? Like, where do I go from here? And it can be not only discouraging, but also really disheartening and kind of scary to look at the unknown and go, is this ever going to work out now? So anyway, that was kind of the original, not only my own experience, but also just so much of what we lived through as a globe and as a world. That really inspired me to just take this message and run with it.
So I know you talk very candidly about your story in your book. Mm-hmm. At what point did you decide, okay, I need to start redefining success?
Yeah, I would say once there was two things that really happened. I hit a really low point when it comes to burnout. Like I completely burned out. I had to the point where like medical tests were showing me that like my thyroid was fatigued, but like I was having physical manifestations of burnout, not just like, oh, I'm overworking myself. And I had also walked through a lot of grief and loss that year. And so those two things combined really kind of made me pause, because when you come close to matters of life and death, or when you come face to face with like even your own mortality or loss in your family or anything like that, it can really shift your perspective in a way few other things can, as can kind of having a reality check on where you're really at when it comes to your own health. And so both of those things really made me pause and go, what am I pursuing and why? Like, what am I chasing? And should I be chasing all of these things, or am I chasing some of them arbitrarily because I saw so-and-so online do it, or because I thought it would sound cool, or I've set this deadline in my head that by X age, I need to have achieved XYZ. And so that was really, there was a lot of, concentrated experiences with both loss and health issues kind of all in one year in 2020, that really kind of made me go, I think I need to do some things differently. And so that was really the start of shifting my perspective and shifting my approach on what is success to me, and how do I shift the way that I'm pursuing success so that I can do it in a sustainable way.
Well, and when you talk about having these crises, I mean, you had accomplished so much by the time you were 25. I mean, more than I think most people, do in their entire lifetime. And so when you look at that, I know you talk about just like the stress of it all and how that had such a huge impact.
Yeah. I think we have this idea that like, if we can just do all the things by a certain age, we're going to be successful. We're going to be happy. And, in a way, like on paper, I had achieved so many of those like bucket list goals or bucket list dreams. I had written a national best-selling book. I had built a big social media audience. I had I had hit 7 figures in my business. Like I had done all of these things that I just thought were like a pipe dream a few years prior. And all of that was great. Like I'm super thankful for those experiences and to have been able to do those things. But I think I made my measure of success and even kind of ran the risk of even putting my worth and sense of value in those accomplishments to the point where doing all of that so quickly and so early, but I think this can happen at any point, but especially when you're young. I think what happened was I began to feel that pressure of like, well, now I've got to outdo that, right? I've got to now write another best-selling book, or I've got to outsell, my last copy, or I've got to, double my business revenue, or whatever these things are. Like we can just feel like, okay, now I've got to like beat myself, and it can create this like hamster wheel, of like, it's just never enough. And I've really, over the last couple of years, and it's written about in Embrace Your Almost, had to learn the art of defining enough, because I think that's actually a huge measure of success. And when you have a period of explosive growth, or a few things work out really well, and then all of a sudden you're faced with something that doesn't work out, it can be really jarring and it can be really like shocking. But in the midst of things starting to all of a sudden not work out in various different ways, I really had to come face to face with what does it mean to define enough, and how do I do the right things for me, not just the things I think I'm supposed to do or what I see other people doing. So that's been a really interesting perspective shift to learn as I get older and as I mature in this process, and as I go through things that don't just work out perfectly, like they all were for a little while, learning what does it mean to define enough and how do I apply that to my own life.
There's so many people right now going through, I think, really deep disappointment, over the last couple of years, because they had goals and dreams, and now they're stuck with like, huge disappointment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things. And disappointment can range from every feeling from I'm disappointed to I'm absolutely devastated. And I almost feel despair. Like I feel like there's no hope to even give this a shot in the future. But in my own experience with both just disappointments, like, oh, bummer, that like work thing didn't work out, to deep devastation of like, oh my gosh, something precious has been taken from me, or I've gone through immense loss when I didn't expect to. Both of those types of experiences, as much as they are so difficult and so frustrating and honestly like super discouraging, I found that there is a unique invitation that kind of is that is nestled in those experiences. And I hesitate to use the word invitation or opportunity because it sounds super positive in a time that doesn't feel very positive. But in my own experience, and I talked to you briefly about this earlier, but in my own experience, it was like a invitation to reevaluate, like, where are we going and why, and I think when we feel disappointed, that doesn't mean we should invalidate or ignore the very real feelings that come with that. But I also think if we can get ourselves to say, okay, but how does this provide me clarity for the future? There is some sort of gift in that, because sometimes we run so fast and so hard and we're so busy all the time just doing everything that when something doesn't work out, or we feel disappointed, or we feel like we're even set back, to try to shift our mind from like, this feels like a setback, but how could it maybe be a setup? Like maybe this is actually a chance to pause and reevaluate and really get clear on where I'm going and why. I have found in my own life, like it is not only those disappointments and those devastating experiences, not only have they given me clarity, but they've also really created a sense of like appreciation for what is right for me. And so I really encourage anyone who finds themselves feeling disappointed that something didn't work out, or even devastated by something not working out, or through something really going wrong, to say, okay, let me pause for a second and let me like sort through all the pieces here, and not only feel the feelings and deal with the frustration that comes with this, but also say, what is this? How can this set me up for the future, even though it feels like a massive setback right now?
If someone's having a hard time finding clarity and they ask that question and they're not really able to see like, okay, I can't really see a benefit in this, what would you suggest?
One thing, I call it the single most important question. And what I mean by that is there's a question that I think is so important to ask to everything you think you want to do, or that you think you want to pursue or work on, or what have you. So if you have walked through a disappointment or a big setback or something that really disrupted your dreams or your goals or the things that you've been working on, I think the best place to start is by evaluating everything that's on your plate. So not only like just all of your current obligations, your current commitments, the things that you are doing, the things that you are pursuing, as well as the goals that you have. And maybe it's the goal that just got messed up and you're like, that's still my goal, or that's still something I want. I always recommend looking at every single one of those things, your current obligations, your goals, et cetera, and asking, why? Why is this something that I've committed myself to? Why is this something I give my time to? Why is this something that I'm doing? And if you, or why is this something that I want? Or why is this something that I feel like I want to keep pursuing, even though it's really broken my heart or let me down this time around? Ask yourself that question to every single thing, because that does provide a ton of clarity. Sometimes you might go, well, actually, I don't really know why I'm doing that. I think I'm just doing it because I've seen other people do it, or because I thought I was supposed to by now, or because, you may come up with this reason that's like not really a strong reason. Whereas for some of them, you might say, because that has been something that I have felt like is part of my life's mission since the time I was 10 years old, or because that is something that will help advance my family, or because that is something that will provide me the lifestyle that I feel is important when I have children, or whatever you might come up with that has, deeper rooted purpose and a bigger purpose than just, oh, I saw someone else doing it, or, oh, I don't know, it just sounded good, and that's really where you can start one by one auditing the things on your plate and the goals you're pursuing, and start getting that clarity. A lot of times, adversity can create clarity in the sense that it gives you perspective, but it doesn't necessarily mean all of a sudden like the clouds part and everything becomes crystal clear. Sometimes you have to actually go through the work and do the work of, let me audit and evaluate every single thing that I've either already committed to or that I want to do or think I want to do, and really ask that hard question and put it under a microscope and see, like, why am I doing this? Why do I want this? And a lot of times that will give you so much clarity and help separate the wheat from the chaff.
Well, we love that because it makes it a little bit easier, even though I know when we're going through difficult times, nothing seems easy.
Not at all. No, not at all. And I don't think it's meant to be, this is actually not an easy process. And sometimes the answer doesn't come the second you ask the question. Sometimes you actually, at least in my experience and what I've found, is it can be really helpful if there's something that you're trying to evaluate, you're trying to audit. It's definitely hard, but sometimes it's hard to even answer yourself. And so it can be helpful to ask a friend or a spouse or a mentor or someone in your trusted circle to help you work through that. Like, can you help me work through why I think I need to pursue this, or why I feel the pressure to do X, Y, or Z, or why I've said yes to this or that? And it can be helpful to have someone else's input on that. And it can make it feel even a little bit easier, because it can be hard, So yeah, I recommend, if you are getting stuck or you're feeling like, I don't know, I'm just so discouraged, I don't even know how to answer these questions. That's where I say, bring in someone that knows you, that knows your heart, that knows your true desires, that knows what you really value, or can at least understand where you're coming from and help you work through some of those questions and provide a little bit of an objective perspective. Because a lot of times our emotions and our personal biases and experiences are influencing the answers we might give. So it can be helpful to have someone else help you work through that, to make sure that what you're answering and what you're finding is really aligned with where you want to go and what you value.
Do you find at that time people are really kind of redefining their own success and what it means for them?
100%. That's really the objective of that exercise. It's really saying, what does success look like for you? And when you start asking why to a lot of the goals or obligations or commitments on your plate, it helps you understand, really ultimately, it helps you understand what you value, because a lot of times we don't make decisions based on what we value. We make decisions based on what we think we should do. And so, yeah, a huge piece of this exercise is meant to help you figure out, well, what does success really look like for me? And when you can start asking why you're doing certain things, why you're pursuing a certain revenue goal, or why you're trying to build a business, or why you're trying to get a promotion, or why you're trying to build a family, or whatever, it's because you have a vision of what you truly value in your life. And maybe for you, it's not to be number one in your industry or break glass ceilings. Maybe for you it is, but you have to kind of work through those things and say, you know what, actually, I don't really care to build a massive business. I'm actually really good with freelancing, and that gives me the free time to be home with my family. You're going to find that if that's what you come to, it's going to give you a lot of clarity on what success looks like for you. Whereas someone else might say, you know what, I actually don't really love the idea of having a family. I've just always felt like I'm supposed to. And I really actually feel like I'm supposed to pioneer this new innovation in this industry. And I feel like I'm the one that's called to do. You'll find that as you work through these, what you really value and what's right for you.
Yeah, it seems like taking that kind of inventory is just so valuable. Is this something that can be used? And you mentioned family, but is this something that can be used in relationships
100%.
and just, school, anything?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's, sometimes students can go through this and find oh, you know what, I'm in the wrong career path. I'm pursuing the wrong thing. I've just been doing this because my dad said I was supposed to, or because that's what I thought would be successful. Or, you know what, actually, I think I need to go start a business or go to trade school. This isn't really aligned with the life I want to build. I'm just doing it because all my friends went to school. So I think it can be applied to academics. I think it can be applied to the goals we have in our industry and our careers. It can be applied to family or relationships. Like, you know, sometimes we find ourselves like pursuing a relationship or networking in a certain area because we feel like left out, because we feel like we want to be known in the industry. But then when we really step back and go, well, why am I doing that? We might find like I'm exhausting myself trying to force or build relationships that don't even really align with what I value or care about, or they're not even my kind of people. Like, what am I doing? You know, so I think it can be applied in various different areas. And it's just asking yourself, why do I feel the need to be friends with this person? Maybe you'll find there's a really good reason, or you might find like, I don't know, I just want them to like me, you know, so it can really apply to various different areas of life.
Yeah, it's such great stuff. Well, what's your website that people can find you? Because I know you've got your show that you do, you've got your other books. I mean, you just have all of your amazing stuff.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, the best place to find me would be at jordanleedooley.com. That's where you can find, we have a link to the Soul Script shop. We have a link to some of my programs where I coach and teach women how to build businesses from home. We've got links to the podcast, which is like a women's wellness podcast. We've got a couple arms to what we do, but if you go to jordanleedooley.com, you'll find it all there.
Well, Jordan, thank you for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time to have me and for listening to all my rambles.
Well, thank you, Jordan Lee. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Embrace Your Almost. Find clarity and contentment in the in-betweens, not quites, and unknowns. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.